Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, investor, and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you some of the insights from retail's leaders and legends, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. Predict Spring is a global point-of-sale platform live in 22 countries. The platform includes mobile POS, endless aisle, fulfillment, inventory management, and clienteling, creating a true omni experience for customers and associates. Predict Spring powers Suit Supply, Converse, Lovesac, Decium, Janie and Jack, and Bouclair. Could not be more excited to be on the Retail Pilot today and to have Jonathan Adler as my guest. Jonathan's mission is to bring modern American glamour to your life by creating a foundation of timelessly chic furniture and accessorizing with abandon. Jonathan started with pottery, first giving the wheel a spin at summer camp when he was 12 years old. Years later, after his college professor told him, "You have no talent," moved to New York and become a lawyer, he attempted to comply, moving to the city and working in the entertainment business. After 3 years, he quit and went back to pottery. In 1993, Barney's bought his collection of pots, and in 1998, he opened his first store. Now his eponymous brand has locations around the world, offering furniture, lighting, decor, and more. His products and iconic interior design projects, such as the Parker Palm Springs, are all rooted in his commitment to outstanding design, impeccable materials, and unparalleled craftsmanship. His motto, "If your heirs won't fight over it, we won't make it." Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. And hearing you talk about me, I sound fabulous.
You are fabulous. And
I always say to not know me is to love me. So I hope that the listeners just get the right amount of me.
I'm truly a fan. So I am going to try to bring out as much of you as a podcast will permit. Hopefully people will get a couple of video clips of this as well, just to see you light up, because the energy is more than just a voice. Talk to us a little bit about this summer camp, growing up, and the influence. Who influenced your creativity?
I had a somewhat improbable childhood for a designer in that I grew up in a tiny farm town in southern New Jersey, and it was really quite remote. And my dad was a lawyer who, provided a lovely upper middle class life for us all, but he was really a passionate artist and spent every second he wasn't at work in his painting studio, which he set up in our basement. He was painting and sculpting, and he was so talented. It was extraordinary. And one summer when I was about 12, my parents sent me to summer camp, as one does, and I tried pottery. And suddenly it was just like a switch in my mind flipped, and it was just on. Like it was 100% on. My parents came to pick me up expecting a tanned, athletic little sportsman, but instead they got a pale potter with a passion. And I set up a pottery studio in the basement of our groovy modern house. And my mother didn't want me to because she didn't want all the clay footprints like traipsing around the house. And she was right, and I was right. And it was kind of just on. Touch pottery at summer camp, and the rest is history. A life's mission was born.
Now, to know, to love, and admire you, one of the key things that comes through is your sense of humor, your wit, the wink, and it's present in your product. Who was the funny person in your family, or who helped create this sense of humor? Where did it come from?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know how good or bad my sense of humor is, but it's funny. I think I don't want my sense of humor to be so great because then it's sort of like the funny girl can never be seen as pretty. So I want to make sure that, when people engage with my work, that it is people clock the chic first. As for a whisper of humor that shows up in my work, I think that is more of a reflection of the fact that even though I'm a potter and a designer, I'm also a culturally voracious person. And at the risk of sounding immodest, kind of intellectually oriented. So I want my work to work on several layers. I want it to be unimpeachably chic, but I also want there to be a layer of content, cultural commentary, And sometimes that manifests as humor, sometimes as just kind of references to different things. But yeah, I think what you're referencing is really the layer of cultural content that doesn't typically show up in design.
Maybe that is what I'm referencing. And, sometimes I think a little bit about Kenneth Cole, in terms of how he views design and some of his phrases, which I think are quite unique and genius in many ways, but also get us to think a bit more about artwork and his product. And I know when I look at your product, it always makes me smile. So that's what I'm referring to. There's this sense of fun and whimsy that comes through in the work that you do, sort of like the way you really reinvent mid-century product. You really add your patina, which include sophistication, style, design, but you've taken all of that and upgraded it to a level that makes it very current. And I think that's amazing, and probably what has been, in my mind, a key part of the success of your collection is you've taken from your heritage and you've put your modern view on top of it.
Well, I think that, again, I hope if you look at my work, you'll kind of discern the formula as I see it. And that formula really relies on a chic classical foundation. Like, I'm making stuff that I want to stand the test of time, and I want people's heirs to fight over it in the future. So there's a classical foundation to everything I do. There might be a small layer of playful punctuation, and that I think shows up both in an individual piece as well as in my work overall. And I think kind of, if you look at my furniture, for instance, which is really most of the biz at this point, it's really quite classical and restrained. The upholstery tends to be fairly muted, and then it's the sort of smaller elements, the decorative accessories, pillows, pottery, where I mostly introduce color and content. So the formula is kind of 99% classical foundation and 1% playful punctuation. Kenneth Cole, it's very interesting. He was definitely a hero for me in the way he used words to communicate an ethos. And I think the funny thing about him is his actual stuff is not that cheeky. It was more about the branding. So it was an interesting way to engage people with a personality that, again, his actual stuff wasn't really in the exact same wheelhouse as his advertising, but what a pioneer, and what a hero and a talent.
Why did you pivot from pottery? It was your passion. What were the factors that got you to expand your world beyond the potter's wheel?
I probably expanded because I'm a malcontent. As I found that whatever I did, I would instantly I would start satisfied and then I'd be dissatisfied and want more, ever more. Like, I guess I'm a megalomaniacal person who just kind of, once I got a little taste of something, I wanted to taste even more. So, when I was a full-time production potter, which I was for 5 years, making everything myself, I kind of got restless and thought, is this all there is? And felt like I had more to say. So what's happened in my career has been quite accidental and quite lucky and lovely. I was a full-time potter, and I realized that I was turning into a factory worker, just making mugs all day. And then I was lucky enough to find a pottery workshop in Peru to help me make stuff. That was sort of after 5 years of just slogging away. And once I found someone who could help me make my stuff, I realized I could say a lot more than I had been saying merely in clay. So I don't know. I just kind of, like Madonna, I wanted to keep reinventing myself and keep growing.
You've taken your business from one store in 1998 and have grown it into, I won't say it's an empire, although I think it could be. But today you have 10 stores, an online business, wholesale, over 1,000 doors, domestic and abroad. What were some of the challenges that you faced, like the big challenges you faced building a retail business when prior to jumping in, you probably didn't have a big retail background?
I had no background. I was like a space alien who just happened to land in the world of commerce. Like when I spoke earlier about my passion for clay, it was really quite pure. Not to suggest that I'm pure, but it was a very pure thing. I was like truly obsessed with clay. And when most teenagers were waiting for Sports Illustrated to arrive in the mailbox, I was waiting for Ceramics Monthly to arrive. So I was sort of like an obsessive fan and a connoisseur. And when I kind of low key decided to be a potter, which was at age 27 after being fired from a billion jobs, I kind of thought, all right, I'm going to be a potter and I'm going to probably live a life of penury, but at least I'll get to express myself. And it was a very, very pure and naive approach to life. I started out just teaching night classes at a pottery studio in Hell's Kitchen in exchange for studio space. And then I got an order and I didn't have any background in commerce. I was truly naive. So I sent my order to Barney's and never sent an invoice. And I finally called them 6 months later. It's like, hey, can you pay me? And they're like, I was like, I make those stripy pots. And they're like, oh, you're the guy who didn't send an invoice. And I was like, what's an invoice? And that is a funny story, but it's also a true reflection of how out of it I was. And to be honest, that's served me incredibly well because coming at this business as a true designer, passionate potter enabled me and continues to enable me to have an authentic voice. So, yeah, I came at it as a true outsider, and it's been 32 years now. So, over the years, I figured it out very, very gradually. And if you're just listening to this podcast, it sounds sort of like I wiggled my nose and voila, here it all is. But 32 years is a really long time. There have been so many mistakes, crises, highs, lows. It's like a telenovela in terms of its highs and lows of drama. But I think being unemployable really helped me because
Motivator.
yeah, it was sort of this or bust. After having failed at like lots of jobs, once I got a foot in the door as a potter, I was like, all right, I have a shot at something and I'm just going to make this work. And yeah, I had this terrible studio fire where I lost everything and I kind of just like built it back. We've just been through a lot of different things, personnel, different business relationships, business highs, business lows, overexpansion, blah, blah, blah. But just kind of one foot in front of the other, resilient, and I've just figured it out.
I mean, you look at the number of years you've been at it, you had to develop and build an online business, which I'm sure was very new for you. And then building out all the categories that you're in today, I guess one after the other, just probably so many learnings as you dug into certain categories like lighting, which can be very tricky, or furniture. There's plenty of pitfalls there. I know that from my background. Where to make it, where to get the best production. Is it here? Is it in Vietnam? Is it in China? All of the above. How and who are your mentors that helped you discern some of the right ways to go about the business?
Oh, bro, it has been a journey. And I have learned all of those things, and it has been truly fascinating. Like, being a potter was fantastic, but was not as mind expanding as my business journey has been. I've learned so much and just, as I said, figured it out. Never really had a mentor. I've always had a series of tormentors, and I think there's a lot more to be learned from tormentors than mentors, if I'm being totally honest. But along the way, I have had incredible people who have blasted into my life at exactly the right time. It's luck, I think, is probably the number one factor in any business success or business longevity. I think things kind of have to come together with a sense of kismet. So, I've had incredible people who's like two of my most important people to me started out as interns 18 years ago. And now one of them heads my design studio, one heads the interior design world, and they're sort of, everything to me. The other guy who's been with me for 30 years just kind of came in one day to help me pack boxes. And now he is my most treasured and beloved colleague. So I've just, there have been a lot of people along the way. I take credit for everything, which is my true skill. I have two really extraordinary skills. I'm a great potter and I'm great at taking credit for everybody else's work. But as you can imagine, to build this business over the years, is a collaborative effort, and it involves a lot of the right people coming in at the right times.
Speaking of right people, Simon Doonan came in at the right time. Now, was that, I guess, did you meet? Did you like, you met at Barney's? Did you beg for him to put your product in the window? How did you meet Simon?
So, my adorable husband of 30 years, Simon Doonan, has been both mentor and tormentor over the years. We met on a blind date. It was kind of funny. I was already selling my stuff at Barney's, and Simon was the legendary window dresser and creative director and all around style celebutante who was like the biggest celebrity in New York City, I would say. And I was like this kind of crunchy potter. And when we got set up on a blind date, we knew who each other were because he knew my stuff from Barney's, and I, of course, knew him. And I thought, he'll be like Miss Thing. It'll be a whole situation. I'm a groovy bohemian potter. And he's fantastic. We met in a blind date. It's just been on. And 30 years later, we have built the most incredible life. And he is enragingly creative, talented, and productive, and makes me feel like a total slacker, but it's been a true delight and a great sounding board. Simon is now a writer, and I read all his stuff. I show him my stuff. It's kind of a great creative dialogue.
I truly miss the windows at Barney's. I think everybody, I mean, miss Barney's, but when you think of Barney's, before you ever walked in, it was the magic that was created in the window, and Simon was responsible for that. He created
Yeah,
an aura that I think was as powerful as Barney's itself. It was the magic that started at the windows.
totally. He is a genius. And I think, he and I both, it's funny, I'm a potter, he's a window dresser. They are careers that are almost like jokes. And we managed to, I think, turn them both into something. And again, that's like things happening at the right time. Like when Simon was doing the windows at Barney's, it was just the moment. It was, the 80s. He kind of invented the idea of celebrity caricatures. He saw a industry that was just be reinvented and did it. And again, with a lot of collaborators, the Pressmans were incredibly supportive. It was just the right moment. He introduced a layer of content and cultural commentary to Windows that was unique. And, I guess in some sense, there's a creative parallel. And one funny thing about my Simon is he made Windows extraordinary when Windows were still relevant. And as much as Windows now are just not what they were. Store windows used to be everything, and now people have cell phones and they're busy and nobody even notices them. So I think he kind of did it at the right time, got out at the right time, and is enragingly brilliant and talented.
Inspiration around product, new categories, where do you find it?
People always ask that question, and I suppose I have sort of a pat answer for it, which is that I try to keep my eyes and my mind wide open. And that's true. Ideas do come from really improbable places. I was out paddleboarding and I saw a beautiful cloud and thought, oh, I should really make a sofa that looks and feels like a cloud. And so my cloud sofa was born. Sometimes I get ideas in the middle of the night while I'm dreaming. Like that really does happen. I keep a little pad next to my bed. But I think one of my go to sources for inspiration has always been travel and kind of picturing singular locations and imagining products and things that belong in them. I'm constantly thinking about Palm Beach or Capri or Big Sur, each of which has a very specific spirit. And I often try to imagine, like, what if Jackie Onassis was in Capri? The chicest person in the dreamiest location. What would be the ideal product to be in her house? So that really sparks a lot of creativity. So yeah, the idea of singular locations and how to quintessentialize them is like a big source of inspo.
In terms of home designers, I mean, I think about people that inspired me my time at ABC, but I love Tom Dixon. Kelly Worsler, I think, is super creative. Are there home designers that you look at? I mean, we talked before about Vladimir Kagan as being someone who's inspired you, but whose product do you see that actually you admire?
Well, definitely contemporary people, definitely Tom Dixon and Kelly are brilliant. And there's so many incredibly talented people now. I love it. But my kind of trifecta of inspiration is probably Alexander Gerard, who was a mid-century product and graphic designer and furniture designer who really married the idea of chic with joy. I think about Alexander Gerard a lot. I love Bjorn Windblad, the Danish ceramicist, who again kind of did a similar thing. He had a unique style and it was both chic and joyful. And ditto Bonnie Cashin, the mid-century American designer, fashion designer, who again kind of colorful, chic, joyful. And you mentioned Vladimir Kagan. What a hero. Absolutely loved him, was very lucky to have met him and his equally or possibly even more talented wife, Erica Wilson, who is the doyenne of needlework in America. She was English, but they were such an extraordinary couple. Hashtag couple goals. And I'm lucky to be friends with their daughter. And yeah, they are both so brilliant. And again, I think Vladimir Kagan's one of those people who he made stuff that people's heirs will fight over. And that is my goal.
Recently, Consortium came in and purchased the business. Why are they the right partner for you? What did you see in that group that you believed will take your business to the next level?
Consortium is incredible because they kind of have the complementary skill set. They really understand licensing and the idea of branding, and it just felt like the exact right move at this time. And as I said before, people come in and help take the business to a new level. That's always happened. I never, ever believe that everything happens for a reason. That's one of my least favorite sayings on earth because, as my friend Ariel Levy, the author, said when someone asked her about that expression, everything happens for a reason, she said, no, everything happens. And I think that captures it. Just everything happens. But this felt like a great move at this moment because I wanted to find new opportunities, and Consortium are just incredible business partners.
Well, I do like Corey and Mike and Greller. I would say Jonathan, but he told me that he can no longer be called Jonathan because you've cornered the name. So he just goes by Greller. But they're great guys. I've been talking to them since they started the fund, and they've made a couple of other acquisitions. Outdoor Voices, one of them, along with, who else have they purchased? They purchased Draper James, of course. Mm-hmm. So I think that they get retail. They're smart. I think they'll be a great partner for you. Where do you collectively see the business growing? What are the growth opportunities? Because as we said earlier, you've got stores, you've got online, you've got wholesale, you've got international, probably licensing opportunities. What are some of the near-term opportunities for growth that you and the Consortium team see?
Well, I would say just more. If someone said, like, what's your motto? I would just say more. It's pretty simple. It's a one-worder, more. So, I believe that the world is very different from how it used to be. There used to be very hard and fast rules and paradigms. Like if you are, in an upstairs business, you mustn't sell downstairs. It will cheapen the brand, blah, blah, blah. That paradigm is so yesterday, as Hillary Duff would say. It's over. That's not kind of the way the world works. I think that we're lucky to live in an anything goes world where high and low don't really mean the things they used to mean. Sometimes, the stuff on the runway is influenced by stuff on the street rather than vice versa. So I'm a believer in just doing more, finding more opportunities. And what I have found is as new people come into the business, they introduce new opportunities. And I think Consortium are going to introduce me to a million new opportunities, high, low, and everything in between.
Within the business and things that are working today, what are some of the key drivers to the business?
Well, we're in so many different categories that
tough to pick. I know.
It's tough to pick. I mean, it's still funnily enough, pottery is still a huge part of our biz, but furniture is super crucial. I don't know. I do it all and sort of try to tune out the truth because sometimes the business truth can really screw up the creativity. And that's my challenge as a designer is to kind of low key know what's going on business wise, but not let it interfere with what I think should be happening. I need to always stay one step ahead and not listen to the noise. And I'll tell you something that's kind of interesting from a design standpoint that's relevant to this. Like, I once got this, like a sample of a chair that came in, and the proportions were just totally off. It called the Maxime slipper chair. The proportions were just totally off, and it looked really weird. And we did it in like this crazy long haired goat fur. So it just looked crazy. And it was sitting in the office, and everyone who came by would make little snide comments like, "Oh, you've done it again. Like, what's that? It's hideous, blah." And I could have just abandoned it, but I was like, shut up. Let me look at it. Let me think about it, and let me live with it and figure it out. And I kind of like had to look at it, figure out what was wrong with the proportions and make it right. And it turned out to be an incredible chair. It's like one of my favorite of my all-time designs. So simple. And that was a case in which all the kind of noise that people make who are more from a business standpoint can really be antithetical to creativity. And I think that one of the challenges, you have to understand that when you first see something, it sucks and you need to roll up your sleeves and work it out and figure out how to make it better. And business information often can shut down creativity.
Hmm.
Had I listened to the business people when working on the Maxime chair who said, this is hideous, you've wasted money, blah, 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 the Maxime chair never would have been born. So design is about redesign, not unlike how writing is about rewriting. And one needs to really tune out the non-creative voices to find the solution to a design challenge. And that's something I always have to bear in mind. I always have to tune out what anybody else says. And often that's business people.
Do you spend the majority of your time on design, or I would assume so as you're the chief creative officer, or are you also getting involved in the business? How do you spend your time at Jonathan Adler?
I'm not ancient, but nor am I young. I'm kind of in the middle. And I'm at a point where I'm starting to think about what my legacy is or will be. And it's about making great stuff. So that's kind of the thing I care about. The only thing I care about is making legendary stuff. Everything else to me is just a means to an end. I did not get into this as a business. Some people go to business school and come up with business plans and identify white spaces, and the point of what they do is to build a business. And I totally respect that. That can be incredibly creative. I did not get into this at all from that perspective. I care about only one thing, and that is making great stuff. So I engage with the business in a very detailed way, and the branding and the marketing, every element of it. But that is really just so that it can be as good as it can be and be a platform for me to make the stuff that I want to make that pops into my silly little head. And, what does that mean? It means that most of my mental energy is spent on the creative, but I engage in all the other stuff to make sure that it is what it should or could be. It's very creative in its own way. I think that the branding of it all needs to be on point. So, I engage with all that stuff, but that's a means to an end.
And you work with the buying team on the assortment to make sure that the point of view in the store is what you want it to be, or is that handled separately?
Well, there's teams of people who do it all. It requires a real varsity squad at this point. Like, I started out super JV, and over the years, we have definitely become the varsity team. So there are brilliantly talented people I work with, but I put in my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's funny when I go through the store, I'm a big Slim Aarons fan, and I believe you are also. And I was thinking about that and saying, you know what? I bet Jonathan sees himself in half of these photographs somewhere. He would have liked to enjoy being on the set of a Slim Aarons shoot. Am I onto something?
Well, Slim Aarons, the iconic mid-century and later photographer who photographed and documented the jet set, and his motto was very simple. He summed up his pictures as attractive people doing attractive things in attractive places. Boom. Like, that's it. And I think what's so great about Slim Aarons pictures is that they feel like La Dolce Vita. They feel like the people who are in them have no problems and just have charmed lives. And, you don't see all the like heroin addicted Italian aristocrats who are really lurking in the background. You just kind of see them at their most glamorous and most effortless and carefree. That's what I want my work to look like. I think that my work, I hope, feels light and effortless and kind of like it was just sort of supposed to be that way, as if it was uncovered rather than created. And I want it to feel like something a loose jet setter might want to have, And the funny thing is, to get the products to feel as effortless as I hope they feel takes a lot of work. I think in the Slim Aaron's universe, he set up these incredible vignettes that capture this moment, that capture people at their most glamorous. And first of all, I strive to do the same thing in my interior design work. I strive to capture the essence of my clients at their most glamorous. And in my work, I try to make my products look light and effortless and joyful, but it takes a lot of effort to get there. And I always think of the slogan from Purdue Chicken, which is, it takes a tough man to make a tender chicken. And I think it takes a lot of effort to make something look effortless.
How do you pull that together and market that? Because it's a lot. It's a lot to show a style, a home style in particular. What's working for you in the space of marketing? Because it's gotten so tricky from an online perspective, from an at-home perspective. Is there something that you can point to that's working from a marketing point of view for Jonathan Adler?
Sure. More. When I started, the landscape was quite simple. Like, I was lucky enough to get my pottery into Barney's, and then suddenly I had gotten through one of the main gatekeepers, and then I just existed as a brand, sort of. Now, people can get their foot in the door by putting something up on Instagram for sale. Like, it's so much easier to enter the marketplace, but so much harder to build any scale. So and back in the day, again, the paradigms were quite simple. Get advertising, or if you were lucky enough to have a product in Best Bets in New York Magazine, it was a true needle mover. Now nothing moves the needle, so you need to just do more, and you need to sort of be everywhere, everything all at once. And that's kind of what we're finding in our marketing. It requires like online, you have to be very careful and thoughtful with online agencies and marketing. We do mailing catalogs. We do little direct mail flyers. We do it all. And that's kind of what one has to do more.
And I do follow you on Instagram. So I love that you've actually recoined or renamed that social media vehicle, because it could use a little updating. When I think about marketing, one area that kind of then blends in for me with technology, and I'm a little bit of a technophile, so I really have a passion for it. Have you ever done anything with live stream selling, live stream video? It's really big in Asia, and it's a huge market there. But I could envision you walking through the store and telling people about what makes up a great living room or what you need to have in a bedroom. And this would be live stream video on your site. And I think you would kill it.
I mean, it sounds like another facet of moreness. So maybe I should be doing that. You're a technophile. I'm a Luddite. I do what my marketing people tell me to do. So maybe if they say I should do that, then I will. Asia and the internet is kind of interesting, because I think that I don't really know. I mean, I'm sure every country in Asia varies, but I know like in Japan, they don't shop online that much. And it's fascinating because in Japan, whenever I go there, which I do often and I love it so much, retail is still just so booming and dynamic. The actual physical store is like, everyone goes to stores. It's quite fascinating. And I don't think their online business is as robust as ours is. So every place is different and has different mores. Live stream selling video, sure. I guess I should probably be doing that. One more thing to do.
When you have somebody who has an eponymous brand for one, but then also really represents the brand, and everybody wants to know, well, what does Jonathan think? What would he do with this? And you could Just so many different ways you could share the thought. People buy stories, and it's about storytelling. And who better to tell a story than you?
Yes, that's probably something I should do. And now you've just added one more goddamn thing to my day that will distract me from making stuff. So
Well,
thanks a lot.
I'm going to follow
Um,
up with you on this because I got a guy.
all right.
Anyway, yeah.
Yes, I'm sure that's, if that's what I'm supposed to be doing, that's what I will do. But I think, I'm only joking when I say, oy vey, another thing to do. But it's kind of true. Like the more one does, the more one can get distracted from the essence of what you should be doing. Like we live in such a distracting and distracted world. And my brain has been so corroded by social media and technology that it just becomes harder and harder to actually focus on what I'm supposed to do. And I'll tell you a funny thing about my husband, Simon, who, after he was a brilliant window dresser, he went on to become a brilliant writer quite unexpectedly. He wrote a book. He did a book of his windows and then wrote an introduction. And the editor was like, wait, you're a writer. You should write a book. And so he wrote his memoir when he was like 51, his first written book. And it was brilliant. And he just published his 10th book. And I know, he's a genius. He is the most productive person. And it's because he turns off his technology, doesn't care about technology, never even has his goddamn phone with him, which can be maddening as a husband because I'll like text him and I'll say, oh, I'm 10 minutes late. And then 3 days later, he'll say to me, 10 minutes late for what? And I'm like, you moron. That was like, I was running late to this dinner we were supposed to be at. And, why didn't you see it? And he said, I don't always bring my telephone. He said, I don't always bring my phone with me. A telephone is an appliance. I don't bring my iron with me when I leave the house or my toaster. So he is not that into tech. And as a result, his mind can focus. He can actually sit down and write book after book. So, should I be doing live stream selling? Maybe, but I also got to make my pots, which are my legacy.
Yeah. Let's end with rapid fire, shall we?
Hit me.
All right. Favorite designer?
Favorite designer, Paul Smith. Hero. Full on hero. He's everything. I used to save up my money to buy a little disco shirt from him when I moved to New York. I would just go to his store all day, every day. He's a great person, and he has stayed true to his brand and vibe, and he's fun and effortless, and he is my hero, and I've gotten to know him a little bit, and he's fantastic.
Number one vacation spot?
Capri.
Dog or cat?
Can't even believe you have the audacity to ask me that question. A cat is not a pet. Of course, dog.
Thank
Obviously.
God. I was just making sure. What kind of dog?
I have a little adorable mutt, foxy lady who looks just like a fox. And, I'll tell you a funny story about dogs. This is a kid say the darndest thing story, but it's kind of funny. When our nephew was like 5 years ago, this friend of his, like a little girl said, I want to marry you, Harry. And then his friend Josh said, no, I want to marry Harry. And the girl said, well, boys can't marry boys. And Harry, our nephew, said, no, you don't understand. Boys can marry girls or boys can marry boys. Anybody can marry anybody. The only difference is when a boy and a girl get married, they have a baby. And when two boys get married, they get a little dog. So, so he learned that from me and Simon. And our last dog, Liberace, was just the best. And now Foxy Lady is everything to me.
Favorite streamed show?
I am rewatching The Sopranos and it is amazing. And now, really, I can't remember a thing, so I can rewatch anything like a month after seeing it. So, The Sopranos, rewatch it. It's incredible.
I will. I love that. And I'm like you. I probably be in the fifth season and realize I've seen this already. I will watch that
Yeah,
again.
I love the author Somerset Maugham, and I thought I had read all his books. And I was reading a description of one. I was like, oh, that sounds great. And I started reading it. I was about three-quarters of the way through when I was like, wait, this is familiar. And then I was like, wait, I think I read this. And then I thought recently, like I had read it within the last year and I had forgotten it. So in some sense, that's disturbing. And on another level, it's actually great because like I have a world of content awaiting me that I've already read but don't know about.
If you had to go back to one club in your lifetime and relive that night, which club would it be in?
Club. I used to love this disco night in New York City when I first got here called La Palace de Beauté. I can't remember what club it was at, but it was sort of like one night and it was just so fun. It was just so fun. It was like a transcendental experience. So La Palace de Beauté.
Were you on the cube or applauding someone that was on the cube?
I think you're referencing my Simon in one of his books talked about aging, and he came up with a great metaphor for aging and sort of the philosophy of life. And he said when he thinks about getting older, he really thinks about sort of the cube that a disco that someone might jump on and dance around. And he said that, if life is a disco cube, he wants to just jump on, jiggle around as hard and as fast as he can and keep going as long as he can. Then eventually he'll fall off that disco cube and it's somebody else's turn to hop on and start jiggling. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for what to do with your life and how to age. And so, I jumped on a disco cube 31 years ago and I am still jiggling and I hope to jiggle for a whole hell of a lot more years.
Well, I hope that as well. If you had to choose between coming back as a rock star or a professional athlete, what would you choose?
Definitely professional athlete. I'm in awe of professional athletes. Like Novak Djokovic, I think is the most impressive human being possibly who's ever lived. The fact that he can be his stamina, his talent, his psychology, it is so extraordinary. I'm truly in awe. But the person I'm most in awe of at the moment is Saquon Barkley from my beloved Philadelphia Eagles. I grew up outside of Philly. I am a diehard Eagles fan, as unhinged and feral and violent as the most violent Eagles fan you can picture. Like when they finally won the Super Bowl a few years ago and like riots and violence and mayhem erupted in Philadelphia, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I wish I was there. So Saquon Barkley has been the hero of our season. The Super Bowl is in a week and a half. So if I could be anybody at this moment in time, it would be Saquon Barkley, who's going to lead us to a Super Bowl victory in a week and a half.
Well, you heard it here. Jonathan, thank you for being on this flight of the Retail Pilot. It's been great to hang out and just talk about you, your history, and all the creativity that surrounds you.
I really appreciate it. I love talking about myself. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and lovely to see you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.